There's a very interesting dynamic developing with Declan Rice at the moment. It ties into England and it ties into West Ham. In fact, what happens with England can have a massive impact with what happens with West Ham, and in particular Declan Rice's future at West Ham. The dynamic is very, very interesting because you'll remember we started covering on this channel England games possibly about a year ago, something like that. And certainly during the time we were covering them, Declan Rice had, I thought, been one of the first names on Gareth Southgate's team sheet. You might remember in the build-up, I was saying that I thought Declan Rice was a shoo-in. He had his favourites. He had Raheem Sterling, he had Harry Kane, he had Maguire, and I did absolutely think that Declan Rice was part of that. However, I feel the dynamic changed a little bit during the Euros. Now, it's fair to say that Declan enjoyed a fabulous Euros. He was one of the very best players for England. But going into it, I think we had 3 friendlies, if I remember. Jesse Lingard got man of the match in one of them, and possibly Declan got man of the match in the other 2. I might have that wrong, but it's roughly there. When that happens, and then we started the first game, there was no doubt about it. Declan Rice was the first choice midfielder for England, and particularly in terms of the holding midfielder. I don't want to confuse the term midfielder with Phil Foden or Jack Grealish. That muddies the waters. They're attackers. They're not luxury. Some would call them luxury players. They're not. You need those type of players in the team to unlock a defence. But Declan Rice is a holding midfielder and somebody who really is starting to develop into a box-to-box midfielder. And very, very good he is at it too. However, as it went on, as the tournament developed, Calvin Phillips came to the fore. Now, this was very, very interesting dynamic for Gareth Southgate because Calvin Phillips he's one of those midfielders. He has actually played for Leeds a few times at centre-half. He's defensive midfielder. But in many respects, he was given a little bit more licence than Declan to get forward. But what he is not is he's not Phil Foden and he's not Jack Grealish. He is a central midfielder. I feel that Declan's standing within the squad was probably boosted by the fact that Jordan Henderson was out. Jordan Henderson played a bit part. He almost played a ceremonial role. I don't know why Southgate got him involved at all. I mean, he clearly wasn't fit. But it looks like Henderson signing a new deal at Liverpool. You get the impression he's one of his favourites. But he wasn't fit. He wasn't part of it. So I felt that cleared a path for Declan through there. It also eased Phillips' path into that England team. However, fast forward to the final, and in fact, Phillips played. I felt Phillips was man of the match on at least one of the games. Declan Rice started getting substituted. Phillips was staying on. It was Declan that was getting substituted, and I do feel the dynamic shifted slightly. And it's not to say that Declan played poorly. Declan came out of that tournament with his international standing increased, with his pedigree, the awareness of Declan was even more so. He was one of the better players, let's be fair, for England. And this is a team that went on to reach the final, of course. However, I think Phillips, in the end, certainly in the eyes of Gareth Southgate, was the one that was going to be in there all the time. Now, the interesting thing is we get to the final, we lose the final. A criticism came back to haunt Southgate, which is strange, bearing in mind, he got us to a final. And as England fans, we've not enjoyed too much success. And that was once again, it was the old conservative, the old careful, the defensive label that Southgate was getting. And a lot of people said, well, you got too many defensive midfielders in there. There's only room for one. Now, I don't think Southgate is for changing on that. I think in the big games, particularly in the big tournaments, he's going to play with 2 defensive midfielders. However, we're now World Cup qualifying. So we've got Hungary, we've got Andorra, and we've got Poland. I don't think in those games he's playing 2 defensive midfielders. I'd be very surprised if he does for all of them. Maybe Hungary to get it going, maybe Poland, but not all of them. And particularly when you've got a young buck knocking at the door in Jude Bellingham, who really, in terms of talent, in terms of the club he's playing at, probably deserves to be in the team. The only way you exclude and discount Bellingham is by saying he's 17. Maybe he's 18, whatever. 17, 18, that's the only reason you'd exclude him, on the basis of his age. As I say, talent, no reason to exclude him at all. I mean, playing at the very, very top level, you know, in the later rounds of the Champions League, Borussia Dortmund, one of the best teams in Europe. And he appears to be one of their best players. I've watched, I think they played in, was it the German Super Cup against Bayern Munich? Played very well in that as well. Watched another game very recently. Tremendous skill from him and strength to set up a goal for Royce. He's in good form. He started in good form. Now, that gives Gareth Southgate a decision, because he's going to need goals against these teams. He can qualify easily. He doesn't need two defensive midfielders. So who does he choose? Well, I wouldn't rule out the player he chooses being Calvin Phillips. He might mix it up. He might play Calvin Phillips in one. He might play Rice in another. He's a canny operator, Southgate. He might try and keep them all sweet. But this is where it becomes important for Declan Rice here. Because Declan Rice, as we understand it, has refused to sign a new contract at West Ham. I understand he wanted to move away. The truth of the matter is nobody bid for him. So because he's not signed a new contract, and this is something that I said as soon as I heard the story, it's actually advantageous for Declan Rice to sign a contract and get a buyout clause inserted into it. Because he's actually missing out on a lot of money at the moment. He's now pretty much certain to go through a whole season with possibly 100 grand a week less than he would have been earning. Don't get me wrong, Declan Rice is a rich young man. But even to millionaires, 100 grand a week extra is an awful lot of money, isn't it? So I think there's probably something in it financially that there's some advantage to Declan signing a contract at West Ham. He's got to wait another year. He probably feels he's already waited 6 months when he possibly wanted to be elsewhere. Now he's going to wait another year. You can only go so long when we think it might be 3 years plus an option left, 2 years plus an option, whatever it is. We think he's either got 3 or 4 years left at West Ham. He's not going to go, that's a fair chunk of his career. He's not going to go all of that without earning the money. The only way he's going to earn more money at West Ham is by signing a new contract. And here's where the England stuff comes in, of course. I think this is going to swing the balance here. I think if Calvin Phillips starts games, and it's actually Declan that starts to look like almost Calvin Phillips' understudy, something like that, or it even looks as though that he's sharing the burden, sharing the workload, one game on, one game off with Calvin Phillips, then that's a massive switch for Declan, because as I say, you go back to the past year, Declan was the main man. I think if that happens, I don't think there's going to be that much incentive for Declan to sign a new contract. I think that will confirm what he probably believes, which is that he needs to be away from West Ham to get that first spot, to be up there again with Harry Kane and Maguire and Pickford and whoever Gareth Southgate sees as his first players, he's nailed on players. So I think if we look at these England games, we find after all 3 of them, Calvin Phillips has started all of them and Declan Rice has played less minutes and played less of a role. I think he'll confirm that. Declan would have noticed this in the World Cup. Declan would have known, hold on, it's always me getting substituted. This other guy's come in. I think they get on really well. This is not to say that there's some angst between them, but there will be a little bit of a rivalry. I'm both of them. I always say this, footballers, elite level sportsmen, they're all winners. Honestly, they're all winners. You couldn't play a game of snap with them without being competitive. That's just what top level sports people are. Honestly, they'll be competitive in whatever they do. As good of friends as he might be with Calvin Phillips, he's going to want that England spot to himself, and he'll have noticed the trend from the Euros. And if he sees that trend repeating itself now, I don't think it's particularly good for West Ham. But there is a flip side to that, and the flip side to that is if Gareth Southgate decides in the main, in the easier games in this qualification group, and we might not know until all these 3 games are done, but the easier games in this qualification group, he decides to just go with one defensive midfielder, and that defensive midfielder is Declan Rice, and actually Calvin Phillips' spot goes to someone who's more attacking, like Jude Bellingham, which I think is the brave thing to do, and I think it's the right thing to do. You can't quite shift from Southgate that he might just put Henderson in there or something like that. And Henderson's a good player, but he's yesterday's news in that sense. And that probably sounds a bit harsh. I'm not saying he's washed up and he's finished, but he ain't going to keep getting better up until, you know, the up-and-coming tournaments. Bellingham is I think Bellingham is better. Here's the point. Bellingham's better than Henderson. Now, by the time he's in 2 years' time, I mean, I think the gap's like that at the moment, but in 2 years' time, it's going to be like that. Henderson won't get any better. Henderson will start to decline. Bellingham's just going to keep getting better. So actually, if what you want to do is build a swashbuckling England team, then you really want Bellingham in there, or another, or you get the Grealish and Foden, or whatever the case may be. My point being, there's one less defensive midfielder in there. As long as Declan Rice is in there, then he might look at that and think, well, hold on, this is okay. He might look at the signings West Ham have made and the start of the season and think, okay, well, this is fine. West Ham have shown some ambition. Granted, we've not gone and bought Cristiano Ronaldo, let's be fair. However, we've shown some ambition at a time when people were worried that we weren't bringing any signings in. We have signed some players. We were up in the top 6 or 7 for net spend or something like that, which is pretty much where we finished. Declan can look at that, look at the players coming in, established players, good players. And actually, we're signing players from Chelsea who have played in their first team. If he looks at that and also he sees that he's still Southgate's main man, he may well just look at it and think, okay, actually things aren't quite as bad as West Ham. And bearing in mind that no bid has come in from Chelsea, bearing in mind, basically Chelsea can't afford him this season. No bid has come in from Man City. No bid has come in from Man United. He may well look at it and think, West Ham are doing all right. We're bringing players in. I'm in the England team. Do I really want to spend another 18 months on what is probably £8 million a year less or something like that? I don't know what, but I'd imagine it's something like that. Or do I just sign the contract, insert the clause, and stay at West Ham for the time?